So in addition to being obsessed with soap operas and the Golden Girls, I am also obsessed with dry erase boards. So obsessed, in fact, that when I started working at the White House in 2012 as part of the first class of Presidential Innovation Fellows, in the part of my bio where most people list, a spouse or children, I reference my dry erase board collection. So a year later, when I started at the Department of Veterans Affairs as the second chief technology officer, I remember walking into my office on the first day and being so excited that I was going to plaster my walls with dry erase boards, and I was going to cover the dry erase boards with all the ways that we were going to fix things for veterans. But this dream was quickly dashed when I was informed that my $100 office budget was not enough to buy a $125 government-issued dry erase board. And that $100 even seemed like a lot because my operating budget was $0 and my headcount was $0. And yet the agency told me my mission was to redefine the art of the possible in terms of how our country can serve our nation's veterans. So a slightly less sane person probably would have given up. But I remembered reading a story about a guy who, through a succession of trades, traded a paperclip for a house. So I started looking for my paperclip. It may come as a surprise to you that nobody wants the new girl with no people and no money to come in and take over their multi-year, multi-million-dollar IT projects. So I needed some way to prove that I was useful to the department, and the answer came in the form of green folders. So when somebody important, like a member of Congress, writes a letter to VA, we put it in a green folder, we call it a green pack, and everybody that has to approve that letter, it gets kind of handed around office to office. And I noticed that the administrative assistants were constantly coming to my office and being like, have you seen Green Pack 52? Have you ever seen Green Pack 52? There were like missing posters with like age advanced, the folder's like faded, it's crinkled in the corner. So I wrote this little Ruby on Rails app that put a barcode on the folders, and everybody scanned it in when they went to their desk. So now the administrative staff knew who had a folder at any given time. Because I could make a barcode, I was deemed a magical genie. And while I still had no dollars and no people, I now had some political capital with the most important people at the agency, the administrative assistants. So in my first weeks at VA, I quickly found my people, Molly, Tom, Ben, and Emily. And we went to another government agency that had dry erase boards, and we discussed all the ways that we could make VA better and our vision for what a 21st century VA looked like. And we talked about how we would help other people see what we saw as the art of the possible. So they say, be the change you want to be in the world, and they say, design for your users. So we took all these Post-it notes, and we made it into a beautiful printed book. We asked questions like, what would it be like if VA hired technologists inside the agency? What would it be like if we were the home of the first US digital service team? What would it look like if we streamlined appeals and claims processing? And what would it look like if veterans had one digital platform with which they could interact with VA, maybe with some self-service? So in my initial meet and greets with various members of VA leadership, I spent a small fortune at Kinko's, printed these out, and gave them to each person as a leave behind. And a few weeks later, at a senior leader offsite, I was intrigued to note that every single senior leader had this booklet peeking out of their binder. They were carrying them with it. They were reading it. They were intrigued. And when the secretary read it, he gave me a head count of 2 that I could hire against. So a couple months later, VA is going to launch this tool called the GI Bill Comparison Tool, and it's going to be a way for veterans to quickly understand how many benefits dollar benefits they have to go to college. If you pick the wrong GI Bill, you can be out like $10,000 to $30,000, so it's a pretty big choice. But to navigate the system prior to this tool, you had to go with multiple government agencies and navigate like 8 to 12 different Excel spreadsheets. This was going to be the first website that the administration launched after healthcare.gov. And you will be shocked to learn that it did not work. In the ensuing panic, somebody remembered, we have a genie who can make barcodes. Maybe she could fix it. So they came to me, and I pulled my little glossy team back together. And in about 3 days, we rebuilt the tool from scratch, and we put it on GitHub pages so we knew it wouldn't go down. I was made to swear on my firstborn child that GitHub would not go down if the president made an announcement. Turned out okay, spoiler alert. The tool has since been expanded and rebuilt over the years, and it's helped millions of veterans figure out their GI Bill benefits. I still had 2 headcount that I couldn't quite hire against. I still had $0, but I had proven that having technologists around could be handy, and that we could magically make a $1 million IT project in 3 days. So the project that really intrigued me and drew me to VA was streamlining the disability claim processing process. And to make a very, very long story very, very short, there was a team that did disability exams, and then there was a team that reviewed the results of the disability exams. And shocker, they did not talk. So when I kind of traced the process along as one individual, it became immediately apparent that there was a gap in the middle. And I wrote up a proposal of how kind of a TurboTax wizard in the middle could get the parts from the left over to the right in a much better way. And because nobody was in the middle, nobody argued against my proposal. And the VA Center for Innovation gave me a multi-million-dollar grant to build this and other digital service projects. We ended up building a TurboTax, which converted 5 inches of paperwork to a normal sort of web wizard with the help of Greg, Danny, and Bill, who are here now. Now I had made a case that you could do human-centered design very agile, affordably in the government, but I still couldn't get a technologist through the hiring pipeline. So I documented all the problems that we had hiring, went to OPM, the federal government agency that's in charge of hiring, and said, look, you literally can't get a developer through this pipeline. And their response was, hey, based on the stuff that you've done, here's 75 headcount and a special way to hire developers into the government. In February 2014, VA got a new deputy secretary, Sloan Gibson. And on his first day, I very politely stalked him and cornered him in an elevator and thrust the glossy plan in his hands. He could not have hit the closed door button fast enough. But the next day, he called me in his office and said, I am in. I want this VA for our nation's veterans. And he agreed to help me with a number of things, including hiring. So a mere 11 months later, we got our first digital service team members, many of whom are right here, to show up at the VA. And some of them became our appeals modernization team, and their task was to reimagine how we can use technology to shorten and improve the appeals process, which for many veterans can take over 5 years. This team did not go off in a corner and hide and build a little tool and then announce it was perfect. They instead wanted to make it possible for everybody at the VA to build human-centered tools using modern technology. So every time they hit an obstacle, like people telling us you can't use the cloud because you can't put it in an evidence bag, they worked through it. And while it took 11 months to get the first code into production, it also means that not only do we have working code in production, but we have modern cloud computing. We have a DevOps environment. We deploy multiple times a day to production, which were things that we were told flat out were illegal when the team got there. And that's because they were persistent and they worked through the policies to change it so that everybody else could build those apps too. One final story. A key part of that glossy vision was the idea that a veteran would have one digital place to interact with VA instead of hundreds of different websites. And while that's very intuitive to those of us in this room, it's actually a hard story to sell to somebody because they don't see the problem. Then we found Dominic, a homeless veteran who had written the president asking for health care from VA. And it is not an understatement to say that this changed everything. I'm going to play a short video that I had to edit for time, but if you check my Twitter, you can watch the whole thing. Go ahead and play.
I know I filled out this 1010 ET so many times. It's like ridiculous.
And is this what you expected to happen when you clicked on that?
That? No. No, I actually expected it to open the website. Now, this is the last time I saw this. This is how it started up, where it allowed me to be able to start now with trying to enroll.
Okay.
And again, like I said, I got about halfway through it, and then all of a sudden it was like, why do I not understand this? What is the terminology that they're trying to use for this? Because this doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I ended up calling the 800 number to get someone to walk with me through it, because I was like, look, I'm having an issue. I don't understand what you guys are asking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this come up too a few times, where it's like you need an updated PDF read. I'm like, why? What is that? Okay.
And how many times have you seen this before?
I can tell you last year alone, I've probably seen this about maybe a dozen times.
And what did you do next?
I think the last 5 times, I just went to the library.
Went to the library?
Yep.
Did it work there?
Twice.
Twice?
Twice I had to work there. One of those was the same day that I called the VA, and the woman told me, after she had me on hold, that they couldn't help me.
Yeah. Okay.
And I remember I was sitting out front of the library. I was off that day. I didn't have to go to work, and I was just sitting there in front of the library like, wow, you people just told me go fuck myself.
So that is a average experience, or was an average experience, of trying to get healthcare from the VA. Now this is Dominic trying out our new way. If you can hit play.
And how many times have you seen this before?
I can tell you last year alone, I probably...
This website. And just talk to me about your first impressions. What do you notice first?
This is definitely easier to read, larger font.
Okay.
It's very, very much straightforward, which is great because the other website is like takes you around the corner and over the meadow and tries to lead you in a back door that's blocked with spikes and IEDs. Like, this is super straightforward.
Vets.gov launched in beta last November, and we continue to add more and more functionality driven entirely by the needs of veterans every month, and we continue to watch it grow and are excited about how that will impact veterans. Next week is a big week for our country. It's Veterans Day. This is a time, especially at VA, for reflection and many, many milestones and late nights for our coders who have a lot of milestones coming up. It's also a big week for me because it's my last week leading my digital service team before I hand over the reins to the amazing Stacy, who will be taking over. We have come a long way from the days of the glossy and the Post-it note. So far, in fact, that this winter, the Board of Appeals, as a way of showing their thanks for the help that the Appeals Modernization team have done, came by to present me with my very own dry erase board. Thanks.